This week on the Autocar show, we've lined up the Triumph Street Triple R, the BMW F900R, and the Kawasaki Z900 that are motorcycles of interest for anyone looking for a high-performance street naked. We also talk safety in a series brought to you by Michelin and bring our first review of the Tata Altroz iTurbo.
Welcome to our first bike story of 2021, and it's between three exciting motorcycles that represent perhaps one of the most popular segments in the big bike business in India. Street nakeds, sport nakeds, call it what you like. The reason these bikes are so popular is because they offer the characteristics of a proper sporty motorcycle, but in a more usable and practical package. And most of all, they are far more affordable than a full-blown sports bike. They all have between 100 and 120 horsepower, and they're all very good fun, but in different ways. That's the BMW F900R, this is the Triumph Street Triple R, and that's the Kawasaki Z900. Let's have some fun. Now, bikes like this often tend to be the first big bike for a person who's graduating from a smaller capacity motorcycle. In that respect, one thing is very important, and that's image. And all three bikes do a good job in this regard.
Yeah, I think the BMW is definitely the better looking of the three, in my opinion, because of the stance. It looks like a big motorcycle.
You know, what you said is interesting because the BMW and the Z900 are visually larger than the Triumph. They all have unique identities. There is a bit of G310 there. There is some smaller Kawasaki Z250 there, but you know, they're instantly identifiable as big bikes. The Kawasaki and the BMW more so. I find that the BMW's proportions are more cohesive. What do you think of the Kawasaki?
Kawasaki, I think it has a old school Japanese design. The way you sit, the tank's wide, so you have to spread your legs a bit to sit on it. But overall, I think I'd pick the BMW as well. It's got a rather unique design.
Yeah, this looks nice and sporty. It is a smaller bike. I love the proportions of it. This new tail section is really nice with the little opening out there. The face... It's not to all tastes.
I like it.
I don't mind it, but let's say it is polarizing. While the designs are a matter of personal preference, it's worth mentioning that all three bikes here are not as comfy as some would imagine, and they are quite sporty in the way that your legs are placed. Now, none of them are extreme, but the most sporty of the three is the Triumph. It's quite aggressive. I mean, your feet are quite far your set. There is a bit of a lean down to the bar. This bike
this is aggressive now, because when you look at the bike, when you sit on it, the handlebar is placed at the proper height. It's wide, but when you put your feet up on the pegs, look at the angle here. That's when it sort of tires you out after a long journey. We covered over 150 or 200 odd kilometers, and I think after 100 kilometers, I really wanted to stretch my leg.
It is surprisingly high up for a bike that is otherwise quite mellow in its character. The Kawasaki is old school, like you said. You're sitting upright, it's like you're in a bit of a squat.
Correct.
Overall, they're all fairly sporty in the lower body position, but I think this is the best balance. Yeah.
Speaking of riding position, comfort is a big aspect that people have to consider, especially because these motorcycles will be ridden in the urban environment.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and by comfort, I think there's many things to consider. For example, the Street Triple was born off the Triumph Daytona over 10 years ago. It's really evolved into its own motorcycle since, but one thing that remains is there isn't that much turning radius on this bike, and you can get caught out in traffic on this thing, and these two do a better job of that.
I think this is the best job of all the three motorcycles here, because look at the amount of steering lock I've got vis-a-vis the Z900.
Yeah. It's better.
It's not too bad.
It's better, but that's like a street bike. Another important aspect for our roads is ground clearance, and with a careful approach, we face no issues with all three bikes over speed breakers. Another thing, again, very Indian environment is heat. Now, if you're buying a big bike, please be prepared to deal with heat. That is a way of life. Big bikes, big engines, big power, big heat. But there are degrees, and this bike probably gets the hottest of the three in jam traffic.
Yes.
It's not too bad, but you will feel the most. BMW is better.
I think this really surprised us when we were riding back from Pune in jam-packed traffic, and we noticed that though this is a nice parallel twin engine, it wasn't really uncomfortable at any point. I'm pretty impressed with the way this engine manages heat, but not better than the Z900. I think that is
it's on another level.
The way this handles heat is mind-boggling. It's got the largest engine here, 4 cylinders, but still somehow you feel almost no heat at all. Right. Out on the highway, obviously, there's a lot of air coming through, but even when you're stuck in traffic, it's like riding a much smaller
it's
bike.
strange because you see the temperature reading climbing 101, 102, 103 degrees.
Correct.
But you're not really
Yeah,
feeling it.
where is all that heat?
Where-
going?
That's really impressive. And I think in an urban environment, that bike is really nice to ride. Also because it's very tractable. You can get to 6th gear below 40 kph. It's the same
Yeah.
applies to the street triple. Like most twin-cylinder engines, the BMW can't do that. It needs more frequent gear changes. It's just a way of the character of the bike. But these two really do fit in well into an urban environment in terms of the engines.
After the break, we give you our pick of the 3 bikes in focus. We also talk safety in a series brought to you by Michelin and bring our first review of the Tata Altroz iTurbo.
And speaking of engines, we have a very wide selection here, starting with a 2-cylinder motor in the BMW.
Being a parallel twin, you expect it to have a grunty nature. It does. Nice mid-range. But it is lacking a little bit in character. I think I wish it sounded a little better. It almost feels a little restrained, as if BMW wanted to be polished.
That's how BMW
and nice.
builds bikes.
Yeah.
That's how BMW builds bikes. And we have got a varied lineup. That's a twin cylinder, this is a 3-cylinder, 4-cylinder. About 900cc, this is the smallest engine, 765, and the Kawasaki is 948cc. The Kawasaki makes the most power and the most torque, while the BMW is also very torquey, but with 105 horsepower, it is the least powerful here. The Triumph, meanwhile, that finds a happy middle ground between the two. That engine makes a lot of torque.
Yep.
Now,
Yeah.
I was expecting that experience to be dominated by the torque, but there's something interesting BMW done with that throttle. You will not get the full access to all the power unless you're right at the edge on the stop. And that's when you get all the performance. I don't like that because when you tend to ride your bike like this, everything goes into race mode, and then you start riding very aggressively. So you can't really enjoy all that torque
Exactly.
unless you're fully on the stop.
Yeah, I wanted this engine to have a little bit more character, more feel, and probably a little more aggressiveness, because I think maybe that's how BMW does their parallel twins. Maybe their customer base likes it, but I wish, going by the way the bike looks and the way it's set up, if it had a little bit more aggression, it would be nicer.
It's also there's no surprises in the way it delivers power. It's very linear. And like Rishad
Same
said,
goes for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of.
Both. You really need to ride them hard for you to feel like there's a lot of power coming through.
Well, I mean, with the Kawasaki, it's so flexible that you can just lazily ride it on any gear, and it's so smooth. It is one of the smoothest engines out there.
Absolutely.
Forget this group. It's just
Yeah.
one of the smoothest engines. It's beautiful. We have an extremely loud,
Acra.
consistent acropolis
Yeah.
on this
Right.
bike. It's a little more vibey because of that exhaust, but even so, it is a really smooth engine. Very linear power delivery. Not like the Triumph. The Triumph is exciting. The Triumph, again, tractable at the bottom end. But when you cross 6,000 RPM, things start getting exciting. And you hit 8,000 RPM and the engine changes character
yeah.
and it starts pulling hard. The Triumph is also the highest revving engine here, going up to 12,500 RPM, while the Kawasaki slams into the limiter at 10,500 RPM. The BMW is also quite rev happy, but 9,500 RPM is as high as this engine will go.
And the thing is, you'd love revving to that
Yeah.
red line because it sounds so sweet, so involving. That intake howl and then that exhaust note, it just puts you in that mood that you want to ride aggressively.
It is the most sporty
Yeah.
engine.
It's
the
a
most
very
revvy engine.
immediately gratifying experience.
Right. Not for everyone. A lot of people will love the refinement of that. And,
Correct.
and that 4-cylinder dream. We grew
Yeah.
up with that sound and
Yeah.
wanting that experience, and that bike does it beautifully.
That's true.
This is just about chasing the rev limiter and, full-on excitement. It's the only bike with a quick shifter, which again makes things more exciting because you're banging through the gears faster, up and down.
Yeah.
The BMW, you can get a quick shifter optional, I think.
Yes.
And this one just doesn't
Doesn't
give
get
the
a
option
quick
for it
shift.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that brings us to the topic of what features each of these bikes offers. And it's an unusual mix, which means you will have to consider what type of features you want from your motorcycle. The Triumph's feature set is focused on performance. So you've got the best suspension, fully adjustable. It is slightly firmer than the other two, but the damping quality is really good. And you can work on the compression, the rebound, front and rear, preload. You can really set this bike up for what you want. It has really good brakes, Brembo M432s. It's got the quick shifter. But then you make the compromise with the display. It's old. I mean, I like it. It's got an analog rev counter. That's rare these days.
I do
but it's
agree.
old. In comparison, the Kawasaki does a better job, and while one of the big issues with the previous Z900 was that it never had any electronic assists, the new one has quite a few to offer.
4 riding modes, decently sized TFT screens, not as big as that one, but enough information,
I'll
crisp,
come back to that.
lots of quality, and
Power modes.
yeah, 2 power modes.
2 power modes.
2 power modes and 4 rider modes.
3 levels of traction control.
Correct.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit in there.
Quite a bit happening. Yeah.
This bike has a beautiful TFT display.
Oh.
It feels expensive. It's a great thing. It's right there, and it sort of functions as a fly screen. So
In a way, yeah.
yeah, there's a little
That's
bit
a nice
of wind protection
observation,
there.
actually.
Very nice to use, but again, you get only 2 riding modes, road and rain. You want more riding modes? Please pay extra for that. You get basic traction control, basic ABS.
ABS, yeah.
You do have the choice of cornering traction control, cornering ABS, but that comes with the riding mode package. So again, I mean, you've got to pay more. But before we discuss in detail how much you have to pay for each of these motorcycles, let's talk about another important aspect of these bikes, the handling.
So I think BMW has done a good job with the setup, because even though it doesn't have adjustable suspension, it gives you the confidence to really push hard in the corner. It's very planted, stable motorcycle.
It's also got a steering damper,
Yes.
and I think it strikes a good balance between ride comfort and confidence and stability. Talking about ride comfort, this may be a little firmer than the other 3, but I don't think there's a big enough difference between them to say,
It's firm at low speeds, but I
this
think
is horrible and
Yeah,
that's...
yeah,
They're all
definitely.
fairly close.
fairly
to each other.
close.
Handling is different.
Handling is different for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Handling on this, it's not as agile as the other 2. It's a little lazy. You do feel the weight of the bike, but it's not bad.
Right.
It-
It's better than the Z800 by a
Definitely.
big margin. yeah.
Correct.
This thing is an amazing handler. It's what this bike has been famous for. It really, you want to go hunting for apexes, just attack corners harder and harder. And it encourages you to do that, and you will have more fun the faster you go, which you need to be careful of on the public road. So yeah, the handling is really in place, and it makes sense because this bike is over 20 kilos lighter than either of those 2.
You feel that the moment you take it off the stand. Yeah.
Sure. It's the only one with an aluminum frame. They're both steel
Actually.
frames. The swing arm is much more chunky. You just know this bike is meant to handle. While the Kawasaki and Triumph are at 2 ends of the spectrum, the BMW finds a nice middle ground between them. It's a good street bike that's easy to ride, but also happy to attack a winding road. The BMW is good looking, it feels high quality, and it is in effect a very well-rounded motorcycle. The only issue is the price. At 10.8 lakh rupees ex-showroom, it's a whole lot more expensive than the other 2, but it is still the most affordable big BMW available in India. For that price, you get a polished motorcycle with impeccable badge value, but when you ride the BMW in this company, you can't shake the feeling that you are paying for that badge as well. And that leaves us with the Triumph and the Kawasaki. There is a price difference, and there is a very big character difference.
Correct. Z900, easy in the city, very tractable, laid back even on the highway. You don't feel the speed, and
Right.
I think if that's the kind of riding that I wanted to do, then it's definitely a bike that I would consider.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's how we're going to sum this up, because you need to ask yourself, what do you want from your first big bike? Do you just want a lovely engine, an aggressive looking thing, but a bike that's easy to live with, a bike that's relaxed, very fast when you want it, but relaxed? Go for the Z900. It's the most affordable bike here. It's Japanese. There's always the Japanese sense of reliability there. It's the bike to go for if that's what you want. But if you're buying your first big bike and you want a sporty motorcycle that you can live with, it has to be the Triumph Street Triple R.
Up next, we talk safety in a series brought to you by Michelin and bring our first review of the Tata Altroz iTurbo.
Your safety, our priority. Committed to safer mobility for a better way forward. Brought to you by Michelin Tyres.
We all notice our tires when they have an issue, but tend to ignore them otherwise. the tire is really a key part of your car. So, what really are the functions of a tire?
So it is important to have a good set of tires for a lot of reasons. The obvious ones, of course, are your safety and handling, but there are a lot of other factors that are affected by your tires. But before we get to that, let's decode the tire and what all the markings on it mean.
You would see the brand name, model name, then you would see a series of numbers. Let's say you see 255, 35, R19. 255 is the nominal section width. 35 is the height of the sidewall in percentage terms between the sidewall and nominal section width. R, the letter indicates the structure, in this case radial. 19, this number indicates the diameter of the wheel rim. After the number, you normally see another number that indicates the load indexes or load carrying capacity represented by a numerical code. There is a chart of these numerical codes that would tell you the actual weight that your tire can carry. Alongside the number, there is another letter that indicates the speed index or the max speed your tire can operate at max load carrying capacity. Some tires also have markings that identify the terrain that they are suited for. There are also arrows on the sidewall or the shoulder that indicate where your tread wear indicator is on the tire.
So now that you know what all the numbers on your tire mean, it can help you in choosing the right set of tires for your car.
A year ago, we tested the Tata Altroz, and it really impressed us with its space, its ride and handling, and of course, its looks. But what really didn't impress us too much was its petrol engine. We thought it was underpowered and rather unrefined too. However, Tata are now making amends with this. Yes, this is the turbocharged version of that same motor. Now Tata promises that it's transformed the driving experience, and I'm really keen to find out if they've succeeded. So I'm going to be focused on the engine and its performance. The rest of the car is pretty similar to the regular Altros. Now with the turbo strapped on, there's been a noteworthy bump in power from 86 horsepower to 110. Torque too has climbed from 113 Newton meters to 140. This is still lower than what the engine makes in the Nexon, however, and that's because the Altroz's 5-speed gearbox would also need to change to handle the extra power. The rated efficiency has dropped from 19.05 kpl to 18.13. Not much. A word of caution though, in the real world, turbo petrols can be thirsty. Now, is it an improvement over the regular naturally aspirated petrol? The short answer is yes. There is certainly more power and the car no longer feels like it's dragging anchor, and it's easy enough to keep up with traffic. Demand any more, however, and it will leave you wanting. The trouble is that while performance is an improvement, it's nowhere near the others like the Polo 1.0 TSI that has a sub 10-second time in the 0 to 100 km/h dash. The Altros claims a time of under 12 seconds, while we only managed 12.68 in a quick test. And this was in sport mode. Yes, that's right, the Altros I Turbo has a sport mode.
Sport drive mode activated.
The regular petrol has a eco and a city mode. This one has a city and a sport. The sport mode isn't peppy though, and it misses that punchy feel. The thing is though, the power comes in at around 1800 RPM and rather sedately. So you press down like this and then it'll build up slow all the way. And then at around about 4800 RPM, it will catch like a second wind. and it's certainly fun and entertaining, but I would have preferred it if it were at a lower rev. The engine is vibration free, however refinement isn't great and it does sound coarse. There's also some road noise from the front, and on the whole, the NVH levels could do with some improvement. The Altroz's chassis setup, of course, is just fine. Ride is superb, as is the handling. We've really liked it in the car before and it remains the same here. Tata say they have made small tweaks to the suspension and steering, and expectedly, ride and handling is excellent. The well-judged suspension along with the stiff and taut body shell enable the car to sail over even sharp ruts and potholes with ease. The steering is nice and light at low city speeds, and then at higher speeds into corners, it weighs up really nicely, giving you a good amount of confidence. And with the chassis setup, the Altroz really has the potential to be a good driver's car. With the Turbo Altroz, Tata has also introduced its IRA Smart Connected Tech, a new color, the one we have on test, and there's also new perforated leatherette seats. There's also a new black and light grey interior that looks very nice, and a few extra features like 2 more tweeters on the sweet sounding Harman system. So the Altroz has a decent amount of kit, it looks good, it's got ample space, and the ride and handling is superb. There's also the 5-star crash rating to boot, and Tata may also play the value card and price it competitively. The addition of the turbo though hasn't transformed the car into the hot hatch we expected. What it has done, however, is it's brought the performance more in line with the car's sporty character and has now nicely rounded off a well-packaged car.